Right, there we go. So we're now recording. The purpose of this is to allow us to post a recording of the webinar. So if anybody can't make it tonight, then a recording of this evening's webinar will be available via our YouTube channel, so that anybody who can't make it tonight or misses it and wants to go back and catch up, they'll be able to do that at a later date. Or indeed, if anybody here enjoys it so much they want to go round for a second go, then indeed it will be up on the YouTube channel. I think we're going to start now. As I said, with the housekeeping, if I can ask, while Paul's speaking tonight, if you can keep your mics on mute so that we don't interrupt him while he's speaking. If you have any questions that immediately occur to you while you're listening to the presentation, if you can post those in the chat, then we will try to deal with those when we get to the end. As I said, those questions will be dealt with, and then we'll open up more widely, and we'll have hopefully a more general question and answer session and an exchange of views after we've completed that. So, as I said, thank you very much for attending tonight. Our main speaker, indeed our only speaker tonight, is Paul Cracknell. Kevin, if I can ask you to start sharing the presentation with us now, please, and I will allow Paul to introduce himself rather than me trying to do it.
Thank you, Pete. Well, good evening, everybody. So just whilst the slides are coming up, I'll just introduce myself and just set the scene for what tonight is. This is a rerun, although a different speaker to a previous session done last week, I think during a daytime slot for other members of the association. So it'll be the same presentation, just with me doing it, but same slides. And purpose of today is really just to give you an overview of what a county deal for Norfolk means, with a view to helping you either as an individual or on behalf of your parish or town council to consider a collective response to our consultation around a county deal. So what I'm going to do is talk about what that means, what's in it, and how you can contribute and where you can find out more information. So my name is Paul Cracknell. I'm one of the directors of Norfolk County Council. So I'm not a politician. So I'm not here to make particular political points. Really, we're here to set the scene. And certainly, well, by law, I'm not allowed to. I'm not going to make any party political points. So if there's anything in that space, I'm going to steer my way through them, hopefully subtly and appropriately, but happy to be as open and candid as I can with giving you a kind of factual set of circumstances around the county deal and what it means. So if we could have the next slide, please, that'd be really appreciated. So just by kind of way of background, and I appreciate there'll be a whole range of levels of kind of interest, prior knowledge on the call as well. So I'm going to try and find a level, but if you feel like I've made assumptions, please do in the questions come back to me so I can make sure I don't make assumptions. But equally, if you feel it's too basic, forgive me for pitching it too low. So the context of county deals and devolution is rooted in a white paper that came out in sort of February 22 and is encapsulated in a bill that's currently going through Parliament at the moment. So it's one of government's flagship kind of policies at the moment. And what it seeks to do from a government policy perspective, what it's seeking to do is it's rooted in boosting productivity, pay, jobs and living standards. It's about spreading opportunities and improving public services. So for example, the white paper talks about concentration of research funding or innovation funding, or universities in the greater southeast. How do they spread that elsewhere across the country from, or even distribution? Or it paints the perhaps extreme illustration of transport investment in big cities like London and says, what does it look like to bring that elsewhere across the country? It's not just an economic policy, so it is seeking to kind of restore or build a kind of stronger sense of community and local pride in a place. And it is focused on empowering local leaders and communities. So the white paper, in their language, not mine, has 12 missions. One of which relates to county deals and devolution. So this is part of the kind of policy picture. It's not the kind of be all and end all. And so from a government perspective, the reason why they're looking to do devolution through county deals is to deliver those policy objectives. So that's what government is trying to achieve. And Norfolk was one of 9 areas invited to have conversations about devolution. So that's 9 out of the kind of rest of the country who doesn't have a devolution deal. So we were invited to be right at the front of the queue, which is a real positive endorsement of Norfolk, and I think sees government recognising us as a kind of strong, effective partner with government around devolution in this area. So next slide, please. So just a quick bit of context around how we therefore relate to kind of yourselves, and then I'll start picking up back through the kind of policy stuff and exactly what is the county deal and how it relates to us. So in the white paper, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, but certainly the white paper, if you were to read it, does talk quite a lot about the role of kind of parish and town councils. It's quite positive about that. So it'll be interesting to see how kind of other wider policy initiatives, not just kind of in devolution, might connect to organisations like yourselves. I think from our perspective, we really recognise the importance of your organisations in that kind of grass level understanding and meeting the needs of local communities, and certainly we've really appreciated your help in getting key messages and campaigns out locally. Some of the things that we do to support the Association of Local kind of Councils is things like funding, officer support, and certainly we're really keen to help support you as a kind of network and work with you in sort of really developing your services at a local level over time as well. So next slide. So in terms of, thanks, so slide 3 would be great, Norfolk's priorities. Thank you very much, that's the one. So in terms of what's our mirror to what government is trying to achieve through devolution. So Norfolk is, in terms of a wider sense of kind of county, has set a kind of series of strategic priorities. So it did that through, we have something called a Norfolk Leaders Board and a Public Sectors Leaders Board, which includes the leaders of the kind of statutory councils, district councils, county councils, joined by representatives from Health, Police and Crime Commissioner, Broads Authority, voluntary community sector as well. And then we also had some events where sort of much wider community events where stakeholders were invited to think about what was important to us as an area, as a place, particularly in the context of post-COVID. And off the back of that came a number of priorities, certainly around sustainable economic growth and innovation, building on the strengths that we have as an area around anything from kind of offshore energy or kind of recognising our kind of innovation sectors that we have in Norfolk. Also recognised as a strategic priority some of the challenges that we have as a geography. So as a large kind of rural county, we have practical challenges around, for example, mobile connectivity or practical access to energy. And what I mean by that is issues around the grid. And if you wanted to do really significant industrial kind of development or even major housing development, actually there are issues around the access to the grid in a way that sustains those developments. So we have, that's what we call an infrastructure deficit compared to other areas of the country. We also recognised in Norfolk that for us there's a real challenge around skills and attainment and jobs that would be what you'd consider kind of higher productive, higher wage growth, more secure growth. Practical challenges around affordable housing, not just in urban areas, and a priority around the environment in the wider sense of the word, whether environment in the sense of safeguarding against flooding, environment as an asset for us, a natural asset around kind of tourism, sustainable tourism, as well as environment in the sense of the kind of green agenda. So, net zero, carbon reduction, issues around climate adaptation and what that means for agriculture and farming in our areas. So we had this set of strategic priorities as a county in the widest sense, and for us county deals was an opportunity for us to really target these areas. And we saw the policy from government as actually there's a real opportunity to bring those things together. If I could have the next slide, please. So I'm just going to dwell on this slide for a little bit more, just so you know, there's only about half a dozen slides, but I'm going to take my time on this one because it starts to unpack actually what's in the deal and what it's about and why we think it's a positive opportunity for Norfolk. So within the county deal, there is a combination of new money coming into Norfolk, greater flexibility over money that we already have, as well as new functions that will come to Norfolk and therefore with it money to deliver those functions. So for example, we have, or we will have, assuming the deal goes ahead, an investment fund of £20 million per year. That's a mix of capital and revenue. And we'll be able to invest that in anything from kind of infrastructure or skills. And therefore, you know, in essence, that's money that we don't currently get into Norfolk. It's not replacing any other money. It doesn't stop us bidding for other money, but it's an additional investment pot that we will have in Norfolk. So that's £20 million per year over the course of 30 years. We also have £6 million worth of kind of capital money that we'll get within the course of this financial year, some of which has gone direct to kind of West Norfolk around, they've got a project of regeneration around the Narrows area in Kings Lynn. Some money's going to Norwich City Council around affordable housing, and we're hoping to be able to announce another significant regeneration project at the moment. We're just waiting for a government sign off of that, which should come in the next few weeks, subject to any pre-election period. Every area with a devolution deal, so therefore for county deals or the kind of deals that are already in place across the country, gets dedicated money around brownfield housing or housing on brownfield land. So in essence, that's about regeneration and accelerating kind of building in those areas rather than greenfield. Those of you who have been particularly keen and might have already looked at the deal, you might say, hang on a minute, that's really interesting, Paul. You said the £20 million was guaranteed for the lifetime of the deal, but the brownfield housing is only a one-off. The reason why it's a one-off is it gets allocated in 5-year periods to go along with the spending review. So like every other area in the country that has a devolution deal, there's only 1 year left of that allocation before it gets reset in future years. And we would be treated like any other area around brownfield land and home building in future years. So we get brownfield land housing. We get greater flexibility over money that we already have. So for example, Norfolk County Council is something called the Local Transport Authority, and we get a number of ring-fenced pots of money from government. So they're anything from potholes through to kind of basic kind of road adaptations and buildings, as well as some kind of improvements and new things, new projects around kind of roads and transport. Under a county deal, what we'd have is the ability to consolidate, to bring all those pots of money together. What that means is we have greater flexibility over the whole total. So for example, I was interested, there was something in the press today about kind of potholes. Currently, as things stand, that particular pot of money, once it's spent, it's spent. What this would enable us to do is look across the whole suite of our transport budget and say, what are our local priorities, and gives us more flexibility around where we would want to spend it. There are new functions that come to Norfolk under this deal. So all devolution deals have responsibility for adult education. So adult education is so it's not higher or further education. So it's not about colleges or universities in that sense, but what it is responsibility to commission the adult education, which is for open access to everybody. But is often really important when it comes to retraining. And why it's exciting for us is the adult education budget has the ability to join up a bit more specifically the kind of needs of businesses and organisations much more explicitly with the courses that are being provided. So for us, that comes back to that objective about, can you link skills to job opportunities or new industries, or the need to retrain in order to fill posts in industries that therefore hopefully increases employment in those higher wage, higher productive jobs that we would talk about. No area in the country has more than that at the moment, but some of the areas who've had deals for a while have been lobbying for greater independence around kind of education commissioning. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops over time as well. We also get a number of kind of what's called capacity funding pots of money. So the idea behind capacity funding is to help us be able to do things. So for example, we get some money to support us bring forward the projects around brownfield housing. We get some money to support our transport plan. So we have to have a local transport plan in Norfolk. And that's anything from, yes, of course, kind of how our transport, improves at kind of access and those kind of things. But also part of our transport plan is also about active travel and how we might reduce the carbon footprint of travel and car usage in the county. We get capacity funding to help us reduce our carbon through traffic, which is really positive. And we also get some general capacity funding, which will enable us to keep the costs of implementing the deal as cost neutral as possible. As well as the kind of cash, if you like, and the kind of tangible things like that, there are some other components to the deal that we think are quite important and significant as well. And one of the consequences of this deal is that government says, if you're going to get this money, and if you're going to get a range of powers that are described in the deal, and I'll unpack those in a moment, what we want you to do is increase the democratic mandate for that local devolution of power. And so we have to have something called a directly elected leader, and I'll unpack that in a lot more detail in a moment. But what it's really clear from the way government works in practice is that those areas with a directly elected kind of representative, it's really clear that government goes to them, invites them to kind of policy setting forums. It's really clear that they kind of raise the profile of a place. They have that significant ambassadorial role into government that's acknowledged and accepted. And we also see that the way areas with a devolution deal are treated by central government is typically they would get given allocations of money that other areas have to bid for without guarantees of success. So if you look back over the last year, for example, those areas with kind of devolved powers and devolved deals, they got, for example, significant pots of transport money that they could then set and allocate to their local priorities. Other areas, including ourselves, have to bid for them. That takes time, takes money, takes resource, with either limited or no guarantee of success. So there is clearly a profile benefit for Norfolk that comes with a devolution deal like this. There's also a positive benefit of the kind of county deal, and in common with any other devolution deal, is the idea is that it starts the process of getting more decisions made locally. So for example, those kind of investment funds, money that we don't currently get, we'd be able to decide locally. The adult education function, we'd decide locally what we felt our local skills priorities were. There's a pot of money called the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. At the moment, areas have to bid for that nationally. If government continues with that fund, the deal text talks about the allocation coming to Norfolk. We get to set the priorities for that locally, which we think is really, really positive. Within the deal, one of the things that we are going to do is have something called a Norfolk Leaders Board, and what we're going to do there is build on some things that work well now. So we have something called a Public Sector Leaders Board I mentioned earlier, which has representatives from key partners, and we're going to supplement that with more representation from education, that kind of links to skills, but also particularly business voices in helping set the kind of priorities that we have in the county. And that links to another aspect of government policy that's already going to happen anyway, but they kind of wrap it up and accelerate it within the devolution deal, which is there's something called the Local Enterprise Partnership, which some of you will be aware of. Part of their role is to really support and develop and, if you like, facilitate the kind of private sector, particularly around skills, particularly around kind of advocating for kind of businesses and their needs and priorities. The functions of that local enterprise partnership will get folded into Norfolk County Council as a result of this deal. One of the things that the local enterprise partnership has to have as a kind of duty is something called a business board, so that there is this kind of business voice identifying the priorities in an area. That will continue. So we will continue to do that under this deal. The other thing that's really quite positive about devolution deals like this is the intent from government is really clear in practice. It's clear in the wording of the deal, is that this is viewed as a first step on the ladder. So the idea is that as organisations get used to these kind of ways of working, shown to demonstrate their kind of ability to use the kind of money and power as well, there is an intent to grow the deal further. So whether that be powers that might get devolved from other government departments or additional funding, it clearly is that first step on the ladder. So that's explicitly in the deal text. If you look at places like Manchester, I think they're on their 6th or 7th deal so far. I mentioned examples where funding has gone to areas once they've signed deals as well. So for us, this is very much about getting a foot on the ladder. To give a context around us, Cambridgeshire and Peterborough already have a devolution deal. Suffolk are in the process of doing exactly the same as Norfolk to implement a county deal. And so the implications for Norfolk are, if this deal wasn't to go forward, it's clear that neighbouring counties would have advantages that we wouldn't have by way of comparison. There are also other things that I just very briefly sort of mention, just to give you illustrations of the kinds of flexibilities and freedoms that you also get under a county deal. So for example, we have the ability to do some things around integrated transport and bus franchising and integrated ticketing. So for those of you who perhaps have been to London regularly, the issue of an Oyster card, there are principles like that within the deal that we would be able to do around improving local transport and kind of lobbying for more work around strategic transport infrastructure and needs. We also have the ability to set up something called development areas and development corporations, which are a really key vehicle as a separate statutory body for regenerating areas, attracting funding, pooling, planning and investment powers. So there are opportunities like that within the deal, as well as the kind of financial headlines that I've described. Could I have the next slide, please, Kevin? Thank you. So I mentioned earlier that there are some changes that are required as part of this deal. The principle of a county deal is that no organisations have to kind of change other than Norfolk County Council. So this isn't about, those of you who are familiar with it, this isn't about local government reform in the sense of creating unitary councils. It's not that. It's not about taking powers from other councils and giving it to Norfolk County Council. It's not about that. It's not about creating an extra layer of governance called a combined authority that brings with it increased complexity and cost. It's not about any of that. What it says is, because the deal is between Norfolk County Council on behalf of Norfolk and government, it says, Norfolk County Council, you need to change the way you operate to increase your kind of democratic mandate of the leader of your organisation. So currently, the way Norfolk County Council operates is our leader is appointed by the majority party, in essence, by councillors. What this says is that under a county deal, a leader of Norfolk County Council would be elected by every eligible voter in Norfolk. So instead of them having a ward and then being appointed by councillors, in essence, their constituency would be the whole of Norfolk. And so that's the kind of directly elected part of them being a leader. Apart from that, they would have the same kind of roles and responsibilities as Andrew Proctor, our current leader, has. So responsible for adult social care, children's social care, highways, those kind of things, but would then also have the new powers and functions that I've described on the previous slides. Having said the deal is between Norfolk County Council and government, we're really clear that this is about partnership, and it's about working together to set and determine and implement kind of priorities. So there are a number of ways that we're doing that. Partly the Norfolk Leadership Board I mentioned earlier, which is about that partnership from different sectors and different organisations to set priorities. But we're also going to have groups around setting the really obvious spending decisions like the investment fund to help people inform the directly elected leader as to what's important to us as an area and to implement that. If I can have the next slide, please, and then I'm just coming rapidly to the end. So where we are at the moment, one of the things that we have to do, having agreed the deal in principle, is do a public consultation. So that's currently open at the moment, and as part of the invitation you'd have seen kind of material for that, and when I get off screen share in a moment I'll put some more links in the chat for everybody to see. But we've got a survey that's open to everyone in Norfolk. We're doing a number of engagement events like this, whether it be with organisations like yourselves, district councils, business events, business networks. We're doing public consultation events that members of the public can come and interact and ask questions and comments. And what we're really looking for is for the people of Norfolk, key organisations, to say what they think about it. Now, whether people want to do the survey or wanted to write in, either way, we'd welcome that, and we would count that. And certainly I'd encourage you as individuals to respond, but also if you feel able for your parish or town council to comment, we would welcome that as well. And we've already had some feedback from areas. Slides will be circulated, so you'll have access to these links as well as me posting them in the chat. But you'll see when you look at the kind of website, you know, we've got anything from frequently asked questions, we've got explainers, you know, variations of the kind of material that I've given you tonight that you'd be welcome to access. And then my final slide, if we go on to the next one, please. So in terms of what happens next, well, I've mentioned we're in consultation at the moment. That closes on the 20th of March. We've been running it since February. The reason why it's closing in March is because we are, as a local authority, we're affected by pre-election rules, and the district councils have their elections coming up in May. So the idea is that we're finishing our consultation before that happens, so that this isn't seen as a kind of politically controversial event that could be used to inform those campaigns. In essence, there'll be some radio silence for a while because we won't be able to tell the public the results of the consultation until after the election. So in reality, it will go quiet whilst we analyse the consultation, and then we'll share more publicly the outcome of that in reality probably in June. We're using an independent organisation called the Consultation Institute to be evaluating the results for us as part of that. Once the consultation is concluded, we will consider those results as our cabinet will consider that, and they will then share that with central government formally. That's the trigger for government to do some action, and it's also the basis on which we then make some final decisions as well. So Norfolk County Council, final decision gets made in December. Full council has to agree to change to a directly elected leader model. Government is in the process then of doing something called secondary legislation, which is basically the legal process of getting the money and the powers to Norfolk County Council. And then the election for the directly elected leader would be in May 2024. So hopefully what you've heard so far is a kind of summary of why devolution, why is Norfolk involved. I've given you a kind of summary of the key terms of it. So the investment fund, over £500 million over the lifetime of the deal, brownfield housing money, consolidated transport, adult education and skills, business functions. Talked about how we're going to engage with partners through the leadership board and the investment fund kind of steering group, and that the only practical change that happens is Norfolk County Council moves to a directly elected leader model. It doesn't take functions or powers away from other organisations, and it doesn't put in additional layers of bureaucracy. So hopefully that's given you a really quick overview. As I say, we welcome your thoughts and views via the consultation, and happy to take comments, questions as you would find helpful to chair and facilitate, Pete. But that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Lovely. Right. Thank you very much for that, Paul. There's a lot to take in there. We haven't got any questions posted in the chat yet. Does anybody want to raise a question through here now? Either put your hand up virtually, or if you've actually got your cameras on, if you wave a real hand, I'll try and see those. Anybody got any questions? Craig, I see Craig up at the top of my screen.
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, I'm looking now to 2024. Is this protected under national elections? Is this funding now guaranteed for the next 30 years, or is there a possibility of that changing?
So there's a pragmatic answer and a theoretical answer. So forgive me for being a little bit nuanced. So it's guaranteed in the sense of as long as we do the things that we're required to do, pass the resolution, government passes its secondary legislation, then it is guaranteed. So that's the pragmatic answer. The theoretical answer is, of course, no parliament can bind its successor. But in reality, you know, the consequences, complications of government overturning devolution deals would be, you know, that would be quite a significant upheaval. So the reality is, as long as we do our bit, government passes its secondary legislation, it should be guaranteed. But theoretically, anything could happen. If government policy decided they wanted to abolish whatever organisations or create new organisations, of course it can.
Thank you.
I've got a quick question, which is a sort of slight follow-on from that. The timetable you put up on the screen on the last slide, Paul, said that the first elections for a new leader would be in May 24.
Yeah.
When would Norfolk actually get the cash? When will we get our hands on the? When would you get your hands on the money? Because
so
it's obviously into the next financial year.
Yeah, so some of that money is coming early. So I mentioned the one-off capital funds about the West Norwich affordable housing. Hopefully some money we'll be able to announce soon for another regeneration project. We're getting that this side of it once, and we are getting some of the capacity funding once we make that resolution. So we'll get that this financial year. And then the idea is that in 2024, once the election is done, then you get the additional capacity funding, the investment funding, those kind of things will flow immediately from that. The deal text outlines that adult education will come to us in 25-26, so the money for adult education will come at that point in time.
Right, Pauline, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I'm afraid I just can't quite get my head around it. I suppose one question would be, what are the disadvantages of doing it? Because if it's just getting lots of cash, well, that seems a no-brainer, but there must be some disadvantages. And then my other question, I suppose, really was, who's going to actually do the work? You've laid off a lot of staff at Norfolk County Council in the last few years. Who's going to do all the work?
Thank you, Pauline, for totally fair, reasonable questions. So I guess disadvantages. I guess I suppose the disadvantage of having a deal is you have local accountability with it. So you have to demonstrate you've done things with it. So within the deal text, for example, there is an obligation to prove that you made the difference that you said. So it's not a disadvantage as such, but if you get a sense of what's the additional burden that comes with the deal, you know, you obviously get increased accountability for it. I think beyond that, in terms of comparing this deal to nothing, that's really the basis of the presentation. So it's really this versus current state. And that's why I've kind of really emphasized the benefits. So yes, some of it is cash, some of it is responsibility, some of it is therefore accountability that we don't currently have. You take your view as to whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. But in essence, that's the point of devolution. It's moving it from central to local. Your disadvantage is whether you think things are done better centrally or locally. Our view is that's an advantage, not a disadvantage, but other people would perhaps take a different view of a deal like this. And there was a second part to your question. Can you remind me what it was?
Yes, you've sacked all those staff in the last few years. So
So in terms of kind of practically, what does it mean to deliver this? Well, clearly there's something around. I mentioned earlier, we kind of will prioritize this and deliver this with partners. So I've already mentioned some of the money that's flowed in has already flowed straight out to other areas to kind of spend. So that's the nature often of how things work in practice. You kind of deliver with and through partners. Other aspects of it will be, it will fit into some of the things that we already do. So a lot of this work will be within the space of Norfolk County Council. We do a lot of work around economic growth and development. We would expect that to kind of be able to absorb some of this. There are functions that are coming. So I mentioned adult education. One of our red lines has always been, if functions come, the money and the resources need to come with it as well. So that's been a red line. So we would expect if the function comes, money or people to do it will come as well. Similarly, the local enterprise partnership, as we develop plans with them for how they become integrated, you would imagine there'll be resources that will come with that as well.
Okay.
Okay, right. We've got a question in the chat now from Judeline, who says, "What is the impact, remit, commitment for underrepresented groups and communities?"
Sorry, could you say that again for me, Pete?
So, what is the impact, remit, commitment for underrepresented groups and communities?
So, by underrepresented, do you mean in the context of kind of protected characteristics or kind of geographical or
Well, I would think both. I mean, Julian, you're still on the.
Sorry, yes, I am still here. Sorry, I thought absolutely the protected characteristics, but sometimes the forgotten protected characteristics, like for younger people. So it might be around particular community groups, but also for and I'm very conscious of the impact on our younger residents and businesses.
So,
has anything specifically been pinned into this at all?
So I guess there's some direct and indirect components to it, and forgive me if I don't kind of land quite where you were coming from. So feel free to come and redirect me, or equally, if I take up too much time, Pete, I'll more than happily have a fuller conversation with you as well. So I guess if I take just as your last example there around young people. So for us, part of our kind of consideration of this as well is, and why it's important to get it compared to other areas, is it does enable us to do things we don't currently have the ability to do. And so some of the things around transport, infrastructure, skills are all really important for us around, kind of securing the future of kind of good jobs in an area, prospects, things like that, helping people have good informed choices around where they live, where they work, some of those challenges around affordable housing. So I can't pretend that this is a magic wand to solve every problem, but in the context, for example, of young people, in our engagement with young people, and we're contacting kind of some of our various youth forums around that, it's very much around that sense of the kind of future. This is about safeguarding the future. I think, what does that look like in practice? Just to give examples, again, I can't speak for, what politicians might decide in the future, but actually we know, for example, if you were to talk to families and young people in North Norfolk, there are real challenges around, housing and or transport, say, into education providers into Norfolk. What might we be able to do around skills provision or transport? This could give us some flexibility there around that, if that's what people felt were the kind of priorities. One of the things we are planning to do every year as well is, I mentioned the Norfolk Leaders Board, but under their remit, what we're developing and sharing with partners as part of the kind of ways of working for that is so that every year there is an annual wider conference, for example, of wider community groups, wider organisations, in order to both be involved in the monitoring and accountability of its implementation, but also an ability to shape kind of priorities as well as to where money goes and the difference that it makes as well. So that should be a way that we would look to make sure we're giving people an opportunity and voice into kind of priorities and accountabilities. And clearly the kind of general, the kind of high level of the kinds of things that are described, the general intent is to kind of make, you know, to spread that, to kind of improve opportunities across Norfolk. As we go through the process of implementation, clearly as a public sector organisation, we'd be doing kind of detailed, you know, equality impact assessments and things like that as we need to kind of understand it. And therefore, I guess that earths a bit more practically some of the kind of high level, slightly theoretical illustrations I've just given. But does that make sense? Does that answer your question, or do you want to come back to me if the chair's happy with a follow-on?
Yes, that, just to clarify some of the things. So yes, I'm very happy to have an offline conversation with you, because there's so many other things that spill out from this question. But I'm conscious that, you know, there's intersectionality. So we could talk about young people across the board, but we know it impacts on certain young people more than others, and we have to be mindful of that. And I'm also mindful that if it's not explicit, it gets overlooked. So that's why I wanted it to be absolutely front about that. So yeah, but yes, please, can we have a conversation? It'd be great. Thank you.
Indeed. I mean, after the meeting, I can make sure the two of you are in touch with you. I've got Keith had his hand up, and then Martin. So Keith, you first. You need to yes.
Yeah, right. Lovely presentation, Paul. A couple of things. I note that
I'm afraid you've gone on mute again, Keith. Would you mind just make sure that you accidentally clicked your mouse? Just take it off.
Right.
Do it back again.
Good presentation. I note that you're fully aware of the mobile situation in the county. I also note that you said there would be more money available for education, adult, etc. I'm mindful and aware of the youth, as they say, but also with banks and all sorts of organisations closing branches and trying to push us all online. A lot of people of the older generation were never brought up with computers. And would there be some designated training money put aside for that?
So thank you for your feedback on the presentation, Keith. To be really candid, I don't know the answer to that. And what I mean by that is, you know, so adult education as a function at the moment, the kind of priorities of training providers is going to be set nationally. What this does is gives us the opportunity to set those priorities locally. And if we felt that was one of those areas, then yes, we could ensure that's available already. I mean, clearly we do already have programs like that and support for kind of different parts of our community around those kind of skills already. People can access those skills, so they should be available. But if we needed to do more or different, then it's something we could consider.
Yeah, no. Thank you for that.
Well, thank you. Martin, you're next.
Hi, Paul. Good to see you. You said that Manchester is on its 6th deal of this type, and Norfolk's on its 1st. Now, Manchester must have done something good to get 5 more deals after the initial one. What has Norfolk learnt from what Manchester has done?
A great question. Good to see you there, Martin. I mean, I think some of it, so I'll put links in the files if people are interested. So if you look in the devolution deal, the way government describes it as, you know, it's that step on the ladder, people get that opportunity to get used to the ways of working and build on that sense of kind of devolved power. So some of it is about trust and confidence as a kind of delivery partner. Does government trust you? Do you do what you say? You're a reliable kind of receiver of money, funds, power, that kind of thing. So clearly that's something that the government would value in places like Manchester and others. I think there's also something practical about how deals get kind of developed. So, for example, different government departments have different appetites for devolution and different pace. So, for example, what you see in Norfolk's text relates to those governments who are able to engage with the process over the summer. And we obviously know that Whitehall had an interesting summer, shall we say. So that that kind of limited some of the engagement with different government departments. So we would expect that to happen over time. So we are having conversations already with different government departments than we did over the summer to see if there are other opportunities to be building on it already. I think the other thing that you would perhaps learn from other areas is again the impact of that directly elected representative who is there to be that single point of kind of contact, if you like, who can be ready to answer the phone or pick up the phone to the Prime Minister because they know that they speak on behalf of, you know, for Norfolk, as it were, 1 million people. They're the people I'm speaking on behalf of, and that, you know, this is what I've got a mandate to do. So there's clearly that benefit of the profile. Some of the practical things that we do in the kind of world of local government is we are part of networks, and we'll start getting into networks with those areas with the devolution deal. So we're sharing lessons learned. We're not falling into the same traps that they may have learned from already, and hopefully therefore we'll be able to accelerate some of the benefits that they've achieved as well.
Okay, that's really helpful, Paul. There's another question that was brought up in a parish council meeting the other day. Is it a good deal? And some people think it is, some people think it's not, but nobody seemed to have a clear, objective idea of what they are saying is good or bad about it.
Sure, I think it's a great question and a fair question. So, you know, if I slightly playfully answer it, you know, I guess, is it better than nothing? Obviously, you know, in that sense, you know, if we don't have this deal, Norfolk won't get the things that I've described. Cambridgeshire already has, Suffolk is going to get. So even at a really simple level, if you look at, will we be able to do more than we currently can now? Yes, we can. If we don't have it, will people around us be able to do more than we will be able to do? Yes, they will. So therefore, in that sense, it's clearly a good deal because it's an improvement on where we are now. Is it a deal that is a magic one that will solve every problem? Of course not. If you said, Paul, would you like more money as part of it? I would say, obviously, yes. But the point of it is, it's that kind of step on the kind of ladder. If I looked at other deals and I look at the size of our investment fund, the way government sets that deal up is on a kind of capita basis. We are slightly above average from memory, looking across all the deals. So in that sense, it's certainly comparable. So if you think they're good deals, then this is a good deal. So that's kind of how I would go about answering that kind of question. Okay,
and one final question is, how confident are you this will lead to a second deal?
Well, I guess there's a couple of parts to that. One is kind of deal is the formal way of encapsulating it. So that will partly depend on government's appetite to do that. Now, certainly this current government and all other major political parties have said they want to increase devolution. So that would suggest there will be more to follow. The text of the deal that I've posted in the chat, hopefully people can see, government is really explicit that they see this as the beginnings of kind of further kind of development in devolution. And I mentioned earlier about money. There's also, you see more money and, if you like, more decision making, more powers flow to areas that doesn't necessarily need a formal deal as well. So to answer your question really explicitly, how confident am I that there will be further deals? That really is the point of it. Can't guarantee it because it's not entirely within my gift.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, have we got anybody else who'd like to ask a question? Ivan, I can see your hand up.
Thank you, Pete. Paul, you mentioned frequently really about decision making more locally. Does that mean county council? Does that mean district councils, in our case at South Whitney, Kings Lynn, the borough council? Or can parish councils have a say in this? And in which case, do we have to apply to the county council or to the new leader for funding?
So there's a couple of different ways of talking about decision making in your question, Ivan. So thank you very much. And I think your colleagues are at a council meeting this evening, aren't they? I think so. So thank you for coming today.
I've missed that to come and talk to speak to you, Paul.
You can go back and say how great it was. So in terms of kind of what did I mean by local decision making? Well, I clearly mean more local than central government. So that's what so often I'd have used that phrase in that sense, you know, overspending or over low priorities. It's in Norfolk as opposed to in kind of Whitehall or kind of London, as it were. And therefore you work on the assumption we know our priorities and our kind of issues more confidently. Practical mechanisms of how that decision making will work. Formally, the deal is with Norfolk County Council. So Norfolk County Council is, if you like, the accountable body. You know, the directly elected leader is the person who will put themselves forward every electoral cycle for the public to, you know, hold them to account for that. But how we will look to involve partners is predominantly through that leaders board that I talked about, and that will be kind of predominantly at kind of district leader level we're thinking at the moment, and kind of key partner bodies, and informed on a kind of annual basis by a much wider, broader set of organisations. When it comes to practical pots of money, to use your specific example, some of that is being worked through at the moment around how we would kind of, you know, would we set up criteria? Would it be a bidding process? How would that work? They're kind of things we're working through at the moment.
Well, thank you, Paul. We have sort of specific problems in terms of infrastructure. We're at the parish of Southwood, is just to the north east of King's Lynn. All heavy goods vehicles for the town come through our parish because other routes have been closed off. We also want affordable housing, both for youngsters and oldies like me who live in a 4-bed house who could very nicely sell the house and have a bungalow. But the planners won't allow bungalows. And so there is a difficulty there, both ends of the spectrum, which I think Judith was talking about earlier on. So it's not just the young, it is certainly the old. The young, very importantly, I've got grandchildren, they all want houses, of course. And so we could do with some funding, both ends, to see if we can alleviate that problem.
Yeah, thank you. So I guess the answer to that is a couple of things. So when it comes to planning decisions, so the planning authorities will still be the planning authorities. So in that sense, you know, that policy will still reflect for you with kind of West Norfolk Borough Council. Mm-hmm. In terms of funding for things like housing, well, for example, brownfield housing isn't just in significant areas, there's a kind of definition. So that might be a way of generating more affordable housing. And also where there might be priorities around housing, that might be something that the investment fund is used for example, whether it's exactly in South Button, obviously I couldn't say that or guarantee that, but that might be some of the ways the county deal could help around in affordable housing. And clearly your illustration about the practical stuff around transport infrastructure, you know, that could be anything from the consolidated transport budget or the investment fund, again, you know, subject to planning and all those kind of things, you know, could be how some of those local priorities or challenges got addressed.
So basically the decision would be with county council in most occasions.
Well, it depends what you had in mind. So things like planning and whether bungalows are allowed, in that sense, that's going to be with the planning authority, which is, you know, the district council.
Yes, exactly.
But in terms of the kind of funding, you know, that comes to the county council. How we'd set priorities would be with the partners that I described.
Okay, right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I don't want to put words into your mouth, Paul, but I would hope that one of the things that might come out of this is a better strategic coordination of issues like housing, like transportation. And obviously
that is exactly, that's exactly right, Pete.
And at our level, in our sector, obviously, you know, right down at the very first level of government, we are statutory consultees on issues like housing. But of course, there are ongoing issues around developing a sort of strategic response through the development of neighbourhood plans, for example, and developing expertise within the parish and town council movement that, you know, that I would hope on the other side we could see some assistance from any new organisations to help us develop the expertise and the capacity to respond meaningfully to a lot of these things, which can have quite fundamental impacts on local communities. And I will mention one thing now, which I was going to leave to the end, and I might mention it again at the end because I think it's important. Is there's a lot of knowledge, there's a lot of expertise, there's a lot of democratic mandate, I suppose, sitting in amongst the parish and town councils, and I would hope that we could develop some method that we would have some sort of representation on a Norfolk Leaders Board. You know, what form that may take, but I think it would be useful for us as a layer of government to have a
and again, Pete, if you wanted as that overall umbrella, if you like, for the sector, you know, if as part of your consultation response you wanted to make that point, you would be more than welcome to do so. And as I say, happy to have a kind of letter or complete the survey, whichever works best for you. But if you did want to write a letter about it and make some of those points, then that would be certainly considered. I can't guarantee it, but
no, I wouldn't expect you to here. I'm just making the point, I suppose, on behalf of the parish and town councils.
Yeah.
Right, have we got any other questions from anybody here tonight? Right, Martin, I see you coming in again, yeah, and Craig.
Paul, it seems the success of these deals is largely dependent on the leader that's chosen. Andy Burnham, obviously in Greater Manchester. Who have you got in mind in terms of their qualities, their character, their experience? Who have you got in mind?
Well, depending on what you mean by who, I can talk about what might be helpful. But then in terms of practice, like any kind of elected position, you know, anyone who's eligible to stand for office would be able to stand for office. And I would imagine the main political parties will be putting forward their candidates on the basis that they select them unique to them. I mean, clearly, you know, what does this role offer, and therefore what are the kinds of people who are going to be successful in it? Well, clearly it's a demanding kind of role. You know, it's a significant role of both profile and opportunity. So that clearly it's in that space of kind of leadership, ambassador for an area, those kind of things we talked about earlier. And you know, they're the kind of things someone like an Andy Burnham is often known for. And with that, I think because, you know, pick up on some of Pete's language, that sense of strategic coordination, you know, there is just something here about helping mobilize partners, acting on behalf of partners, getting the confidence of partners and working together. So there's a real kind of practical political skill in that respect as well. And I guess if you take my central argument that this should be a first step on a ladder, you'd want someone who helps us go up that ladder further.
Good answer, Paul.
Craig.
Yeah, but one final one from me. Thank you. I think it's been excellent so far. In terms of looking at this commercially, obviously you have a lot of stakeholders. You're talking about leadership groups. Clearly, if you're having this size magnitude of investment coming into the area, there's got to be some commercial benefit. Can I ask, what do we see as the strategic industry sectors that are going to drive growth forwards into the future that will hopefully improve the lives, welfare of all residents of Norfolk? And you talked about the joined up, obviously, thinking. You might hear in the accent, I'm a Yorkshireman, so I'm very keen on this in terms of, you know, springboard development centres, links with universities, how we can link into industry. So really keen to see where some of this funding may go in the future, if you're able to talk about that, Paul.
Yeah, so if I talk generally, partly so I don't overextend my knowledge base and therefore give you a kind of superficial answer, but I guess in general terms, you know, we know that we've got some real strengths in Norfolk. So anything, for example, if you take things like offshore energy, that's a kind of real strength, the proportion that we do and associated industries around that. Clearly, we're kind of pioneers around kind of certain tech centres, so whether it be agri-tech, financial tech, those kind of things are real opportunity areas. Sustainable tourism that brings some of that together as well, and the general kind of tourism kind of sector as well. But equally, we have kind of hidden sectors that Norfolk's really strong in that perhaps doesn't have kind of high profile. So picking up on the tech and innovation, you know, whether that be kind of gaming industry, you know, those kind of things, we have real pockets of that in Norfolk as well. And in the context of the deal, this is where I'm stopping to now overextend, you know, in case if I miss someone out and someone's offended. But, you know, I guess that's really where the real benefit of bringing in some of the local enterprise partnership functions, the business board. We're doing quite a lot of consultation with the business sector around what might that look like. How do we make sure we kind of build in those kind of voices and priorities that might then inform either the infrastructure spend or the skills spend or skills commissioning that might then, you know, either secure or attract or retain those kind of industries as well. And then you've of course, you know, we've got the obvious big kind of brand names in Norfolk that people will be familiar with, the Avivas, the Lotuses, you know, those kind of things that we can build on, as well as the research parks, innovation parks, etc., that we have already.
Good, thank you. Right, has anybody got any burning questions at the moment before I let you all go and have your tea if you haven't already had it, or a gin and tonic if you want to relax for the rest of the evening? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands going up, either virtual or in reality. So if I can just conclude then by urging you all to go and look at the material that is online. Paul, slides from this evening's we will post on our website so that you'll be able to access the direct links and the QR codes if you want those to access the information or to make your views known. Again, thank you very much for you all turning out tonight. Thank you very much to Paul for giving us his time and sharing his knowledge and his views. Thank you to Kevin for running the presentation in the background. And I just say again, we will be posting this on our YouTube channel. So if anybody you know of hasn't been able to make tonight and would like to catch up with what's been said, that can be fine just by searching for Norfolk ALC on YouTube, and you'll see this and all our other webinars posted up there. So thank you very much for your time and have a good rest of the evening and good night.
Thanks all. Take care. Bye-bye.